Welcome to View from Left Field, a progressive podcast analyzing and discussing the burning issues of the day. View from Left Field is the official podcast of the Movements for People's Democracy Coalition. Movement for People's Democracy Coalition is a progressive coalition of organizations that represent the various social issues facing the country. The coalition's aim is to build a labor-led anti-monopoly coalition to fight the rising fascism in America. On the panel today, there is myself, Nolan, and I am here on behalf of Labor United Educational League.
Hi, this is Jerry. I'm representing the United Jewish People's Fraternal Order. It's a working class Jewish American organization. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, I'm SM Safoni. I'm representing New Outlook Publishers, progressive public publishing house associated with the MPD coalition.
Tyler Radzinski of the American Slav Congress here. The American Slav Congress of the trying to bring a progressive voice from the Slavic population to fight fascism, imperialism, and racism.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samia V. I'm representing Women for Racial and Economic Equality, and we're fighting for the rights of women, children, and working families.
Jim Dougherty of the Irish American Connolly Council, helping Irish Americans realize their working class and revolutionary roots.
Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here today, and glad everyone is doing well. So, a big topic that is going on, and especially both my own coworkers and the people in my town are talking about fascism and the rise of it in the United States. In case everyone knows, I am based out of Minnesota, and we have seen a large presence of ICE and the events that have been going on here, especially within the past year. Someone once said there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. Decades have definitely been happening in weeks here. ICE has ICE, or Immigration Customs Enforcement, has seen a rise of civil rights violations and also citizens getting killed and executed in the streets, like Renee Good and Alex Preety, as well as homes being entered into without any warrants, people being abducted from them, ICE agents stealing property, and reports of sexual assaults, and detainees either showing up dead or disappeared, as well as children getting detained, and conditions in detention centers of rotten food, bad water, and people forced to sleep together in freezing conditions. For the other panelists today, what's been your experience in your areas?
This is Jerry speaking, and it's been pretty depressing. I would say it's obviously not as bad as it has been in Minneapolis. I think Minneapolis has been targeted by the Trump administration for several reasons. One, because it's a controlled Democratic bastion, I know. So it creates a lot of scapegoats. What I do see is a lot of disappointing responses, I know. What I'll say in like the Jewish community in a lot of places. It's been pretty positive. I know temple I go to has said some positive things that are anti-fascist for obvious reasons. And then it's funny because then I'll see establishment-based groups like the ADL say some things like, "Oh, this has anything equatable to the Holocaust," which is nonsense. I think we see a lot of similarities of what's happening today in like the early years of Nazi Germany under Hitler. We can go into that to some detail. You just see that people are just literally being taken out without any legal jurisdiction. People are being executed in broad daylight. I don't know what else to call that, but fascism. It's very scary, and I think a lot of people, not just Jewish people, see that, and hopefully I do see some positive things happening from Minneapolis, and I think we see some support that's happening around the nation. So here's one thing that I think that Nazi Germany did not have: cameras in everyone's pocket. And I've noticed that that has been a positive to kind of reveal and shine a light on what's really happening, which is fascism. Think about what Nazi Germany could have had if everyone just had iPhones in their pocket and filming what they were doing, like the SS were doing to, or the brown shirts were doing to Jews in the streets.
And
So that's positive in that sense.
and think of the people missing from ICE detention. And as we know, they're just missing. But right now, we're looking at about 7% of all prisoners that have been taken by ICE in the last year have gone missing. And this is early stages. I don't know the details that well of the early stages of Nazi Germany, but I don't think the prisoners went missing at that rate that early. They started to be executed or killed at that point. And I've heard stories about in wooded areas not far from ICE detention facilities, they're letting people out in the middle of the night that are injured or have just leaving them to die. And if people aren't out there to catch them, who knows how these people would end up? And I wonder how many of those people are from the missing list. So we're already looking at really potentially thousands of people that may end actually have been killed. We don't know because they're missing already.
Found in the middle of forests or like woods or something sometimes too, I've heard.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
keep in
that's where
mind
they
that
live.
this is in the middle of winter as well.
Yeah, they're releasing them in the middle, like in the middle, in the woods in the middle of the night, and these are like injured people, and people that really have no way to fend for themselves. But then you add to it the way the Trump regime is attacking disabled people, special needs people. We're seeing there's a lot of early childhood education centers, and of course, the so-called fraud in Minneapolis is why in Minnesota is why ICE is in Minnesota. But they're also using that to justify cutting funds to early childhood education everywhere.
Oh.
And something they're doing anything that talks about accessibility and support for disabled people, childhood education mentions this in any way, they're cutting funding. So they're attacking not just the most vulnerable people in general, but they're attacking the disabled children, kids that have no really way to fend for themselves. And myself as a parent of a special needs daughter, and knowing how the Nazis treated the disabled, how could you not see the comparison?
And there's also been reports here of them hanging out outside of schools, either waiting for the kids themselves or their parents to appear. And I believe there's also been some reports where they've used children as a hostage to lure out the parents from either their house or another area.
Well,
And then
didn't they
blame
also?
them for not going out, saying that, oh, well, they left their kid out there. Well, right, because you were going to arrest them and their other kids as well. So what else were they left to do?
And after they murdered Renee Good, didn't they go try to raid a school right after?
They did. They went to Roosevelt High School, which is a high school on north central Minneapolis that was nearby, and basically they ended up there were videos of flashbangs and chemical weapons being used outside the school, and teachers frantically trying to get the students back inside the school.
Yeah, I think it's particularly disturbing that they're detaining kids. Most recently, the number of kids being detained by ICE has jumped significantly. I think it's been like over 400. In the news, there was a 5-year-old detained by ICE along with his father, and the conditions in these detention centers, which are frankly basically concentration camps, are so horrible. People are, dying of diseases. The 5-year-old child who was detained is now sick. They're not being tortured or abused. They're certainly dying of being denied medical care, not having enough food or water.
These facilities, as well, also keep in mind, are not just Bureau of Prison or federal penitentiaries. These are private facilities that are run by for profit companies that contract out and get all these lucrative contracts from both state and federal government. And a lot of their owners were also big time donors to Donald Trump and
Yeah,
many other politicians.
and let's call them what they are. They're concentration camps. These aren't typical prisons where you have a couple people to a cell. They're loading up by the dozens people in a small cell in some of the most abhorrent conditions. We constantly attack foreign countries for far less.
Well,
It's
don't
really
worry.
it's
Go ahead.
it's starting to feel like it's not really about immigration anymore. You know, I have plenty of coworkers who think that being able to crack down on illegal immigration is going to solve economic problems. Last I checked, we're still not, we're not even deporting as many people as Obama did at this rate. Under the Trump administration, it's not even like we're matching those numbers. So what are we doing? Essentially, we're just fostering a very rogue paramilitary force within our own borders that is preying on illegal immigrants, but it doesn't even feel like that's the whole point anymore.
Was it ever?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I wanted to say like, just the like who these ICE quote unquote officers are. So as we all know, they're not required to give any identification. They're allowed to wear masks. There has been cases where they found hardened January 6 rioters or pushes.
There was
The
also a recent leak where names of agents were revealed, and a lot of three percenters,
Proud
Patriot
Boys.
Front, and other Proud Boys
right.
names were on the roll of.
Right. So, I mean, they're obviously bringing in, well, not just white nationalists, but even those convicted of terrorism. And I shared here, obviously the audience can't see it, but the Department of Homeland Security, they've been using their social media as a propaganda outlet, and I'll describe the photo. So it is a recruitment poster for ICE, and it has a caption that says "America needs you. Join ICE now," and it's Uncle Sam looking at a sign where in it says cultural decline, or the signpost has many arrows. One way is cultural decline, one is invasion, and again, they're making this, they're using posters that were used to recruit soldiers for World War II. So they're making it very clear that they are declaring a war or waging a war on people that they say are creating cultural decline and invading.
Well,
I,
it's even more insidious than that because you see the caption they put on it in the post, "Which way, American man?" That's a take on "Which Way, Western Man," which is a white nationalist neo-Nazi book popular in far right circles. And it's not just these old.
Wow.
I see this post was from August. Since then, it's gotten so much worse because they're using old Nazi propaganda. They're outright reusing and remaking Nazi propaganda at this point. But how dare we call them Nazis?
Though Trump did tell Mondani he could call him a Nazi. That's fine. He went to the White
Well,
House.
and the thing is with this picture Tyler
well,
just shared was it's like he ripped off Law and Order. Well, I mean, actually, that seems pretty accurate that they are ripping off Law and Order. They're just breaking the laws and there is no order. They're just killing freely.
right. And I think another, they like to sprinkle in hints at what their real agenda is. What was it? Back in uh, earlier this month, January 2026, after the killing of uh, Renee Good, Christy Nome, the Secretary of Homeland Security,
Nazi Barbie.
yeah, she justified the killing of Renee Good, with the quote, "One of ours, all of yours," which when someone looks into, it was uh, it was a slogan to justify the Nazis liquidating a Czechoslovak city after a an SS soldier was murdered. So, they're obviously choosing their words carefully here.
Is that in reference to Charlie Kirk's death? The one?
No,
No.
that was in response. That was actually in response to Alex Preddy's the reaction to Alex Preddy's murder.
No,
Oh,
my
I thought
point
this
is
was.
who's the one that I guess which
Nobody was
Nazi
killed.
died?
No, nobody was killed.
Well, then it doesn't even make sense. But whatever. I mean, I guess nothing has to make sense with them. Is
Well, no, it doesn't make sense at all.
All right. Well, I think the point here is that they are they're not just choosing slogans and phrases arbitrarily. They are choosing them to basically throw in our faces their agenda.
And more and more
Hiding in plain sight.
and more people, at least around here, in the Twin Cities areas, are coming to realize this. After the murder of Renee Good, the Minneapolis, I believe it was the Regional Labor Council, called for a what they called a day of truth and freedom. They can't use the word strike because Taft-Hartley and all the other laws say can't use that word. But they called it that, and then the Minnesota AFL-CIO followed up to where on the 23rd we had about 35,000 plus. I've even heard reports up to 50,000 plus people were out on the streets in what was negative like 10, -8 degree weather, just in support for a what they were unofficially calling a strike. But about 900 businesses across the Twin Cities shut down in solidarity for it. There was also an action at the airport where ICE had been using the airport to transport out people, and so 100 clergy people for and airport workers shut down the airport for a while. And then, of course, the day after, that's when Alex Preddy got executed on the streets. So it's been people are coming around and waking up that hey, we are in a fascist state. This is a fascist government, and especially also with videos of people getting basically seized out of their homes with no warrant. And I know recently there was a video of an elderly Hmong man getting dragged out in sub-zero temperatures, no shirt on, and then stuffed into a car and basically disappeared.
a lot of U.S. citizens. I don't remember if he was, but a lot of these
He
people are
was,
U.S. citizens. Okay.
but citizenship is not where rights start. Can't forget, this is supposedly a free country based on fundamental freedoms. I know there's some criticism in the way we term freedoms, negative freedoms as opposed to positive freedoms, but because this is an attack on the fundamental right to exist as a human
Hmm.
being.
An old professor of mine, really quick, had a great joke about this. It goes, what's the definition of a human being? Somebody with their paperwork in order.
Oh, but even then,
That in a way is dehumanizing.
All
But
right.
what's the solution? How do we fix this? I
I
know
think
I saw a bill that was proposed in Philadelphia. It would bar agents from wearing masks. They must show ID. They're only allowed to use judicial warrants, which is supposed to be the law anyway. And if they assault a bystander, they get arrested. It sounds great on paper. I don't know how well that'll fly, especially with the federal government blocking access to localities on investigations, as we've seen with the Renee Good and Alex Preddy executions.
we're seeing what we're supposed to do. I think we're seeing it in Minnesota. I was knew immediately, there were strongly colorful words, I guess from the mayor, what's his name, Jacob Fry, and other people that said, "Oh, well, this is ridiculous. We can't stand for this." But it's just, giving cookies to people. It's nothing.
I
But
feel your
when you actually
frustration.
see people in the streets doing something, I think that actually does have some merit to it. And I think Minneapolis is really just an example of what we should be doing around the country when they come for us. I think there is something there. It's
And
just no one
I
is running it. There's no center controlling that, and it's a little
Well, really quickly
disorganized.
on SM Siphone's point earlier, it's also you can get all those laws and everything pretty said, and then who's the heck's going to enforce them? Like, for example, recently out of Los Angeles, the cops said even though the state passed this law recently saying all ICE agents have to be unmasked or there's a ban on masks for them, they're not going to enforce it or do anything about it. So, and that's I find it even more ironic when a few weeks ago around here, Brooklyn Park, which is a city to the northwest of the Minneapolis area. The police chief was on camera complaining that his own off duty officers were getting pulled over, stopped, and seized by ICE.
Okay.
It was just like, well, nothing else is happening. What did you expect? So no, people definitely organizing, building coalitions and action networks and actually trying to come together to form a common united front is definitely the way forward with a lot of these.
How do we do that? Who's
and
going to
back
charge?
and real quick, I know I asked this question on what do we do to fix it, but I want to mention, I know I said the word execution with Renee Good and Alex Purdy, but Alex Purdy was a blatant execution, especially now with all the details that when they were tracking him and they knew his movements because they had an encounter with him a week earlier. And you see the way he was assaulted by those agents before he was shot and killed. The way his gun on his waistband was taken from him. He never reached for it. And then you look at the way agents were holding their gun over his head, one hand with the trigger over his head well before he was shot. You could tell that was set up and that was a gang style execution. That was clearly premeditated. Obvious to anybody with eyes who saw that video and knows the backstory.
And around here, at least in response to everything going on, Pam Bondi, I don't know if you want to call her a lawyer, I think would be an insult to lawyers calling her that. But anyway, she had sent a strongly worded letter to the governor here saying you need to end the chaos in the streets going on, and then gave three possible quote unquote solutions to solving the chaos, which kind of almost all had nothing to do with immigration or ICE. First, she wanted Minnesota's records on all Medicare and food and nutrition service programs, including SNAP program, sent to the sent to her. As well, she wanted a repeal of sanctuary policies, quote unquote, or the sanctuary laws in Minnesota that she says is fueling all the crime and violence. And then lastly, she wanted the Minnesota state voter registration voter rolls to go or to be allowed access by the Department of Justice. So, what does all this have to do with actually bringing any law and order? Nothing. It's all just an intimidation, and there's nothing that comes of it.
Let's keep in mind Minnesota is one of the lowest crime states in the country. And sanctuary and this is an attack the sanctuary city, so-called sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. All sanctuary means is protection of due process. Let's keep that in mind. They're against due process. It's front and center. That's all it is. And they're fear mongering over due process and people's rights being protected while they go through the legal process. It's a joke.
It should just be the norm. We shouldn't have to call them
Yeah.
sanctuary cities. We should say
No,
like
we should not.
you should just be, going along with the law. I guess non-sanctuary cities are just lawless cities.
But and again, with this letter saying restoration to chaos and the solving of the crime didn't exist before ICE showed up. And that last point on the voter rolls is the worst. It's clear what they're trying to do. And I know a lot of the mainstream media presented this as demands for ICE to leave. But if you actually anybody who's actually read the letter would see they're calling for them to support ICE and their
Right.
actions. There's nowhere in this letter is ICE leaving mentioned.
Right.
The only part is just fully cooperate with ICE. Not we're gonna take them off the street or anything.
And I saw somewhere, and keep in mind, Minnesota has one of the lowest rates of undocumented immigrants in the country. The amount of ICE agents they flooded into these cities, that it's more than like three, four times the size of the local police forces in Minneapolis. And then you have other places where it's supposedly about immigration, but places that have 10, 100 times the undocumented immigrants have a fraction of ICE agents, but they're Republican-led states.
And I guess Nolan, a question for you since you're
Yes.
in Minneapolis. I what is whose side is the police on in this issue? Are they complying with ICE or are they protecting the protesters? I asked for a
What?
specific reason.
Well, I can say they're mostly definitely not doing the latter thing. If anything, they are anywhere from assisting with some of the quote unquote enforcement. Like, for example, it's protests against ICE have been broken up by either police or the state patrol who come in with the full armor, the tear gas, and all the munitions. Other times it's just the police kind of stand by watching a confrontation off between ICE and the anti-ICE protesters. Not really either trying to protect the protesters or ICE, just I guess maybe trying to see is something going to happen. If anything, the National Guard that have been deployed around here have been more somewhat of a positive thing towards the protesters, but I think that maybe more just kind of PR trying to smooth over
Mm.
relations.
Hmm.
And I guess keep in mind that the National Guard is the Minnesota National Guard, so they're
Yeah.
made up of local Minnesotans, so a more they'd have more reason to be more friendly to people around here than federal agents from out of state. But definitely say um, yeah, the police here are either they've been assisting with breaking up crowds or they just kind of stand on the side.
Yeah, I asked that because as we're seeing this, we know that ICE is lawless. We know that they're going to do what they're going to do because they are white nationalists. They come from terrorist organizations on the right. So,
It's amazing how
uh,
all those neo-fascist paramilitaries aren't marching anywhere anymore.
right. The police and even the military, they're sworn in to defend the Constitution. We've seen through ICE raids across the country, violating various amendments to the Constitution, such as the Fourth Amendment, the protection against illegal search and seizure. But now we're also seeing the debate around the Second Amendment. What does the Second Amendment mean if the government can kill people for carrying?
And
Uh,
also, then the president says, well, you can't carry when you go out in public, period.
Regardless of people's opinions on it, I think that the police, especially, need to be reminded that by working with ICE, they are going against their supposed principles of upholding the Constitution.
Well, I'm not 100% sure if police have to actually swear an oath to defend the Constitution when they're sworn in. Also, courts have found that the police do not have a duty to protect you or anyone else in any operations as well. But
So I still
essentially, what
can't
they run,
trust the police, is what you're saying?
just, yeah, I don't know, school shooting somewhere and don't expect them to actually save your kids.
We can't forget that they're here to protect capitalist system essentially that
Ding,
we
ding,
live
ding.
under.
Sorry, Noel, you told me a story. I don't know if you want to repeat it. You did talk to some people, some officials. I guess it was at a bookstore, but you had a good conversation with them. Did you not?
So this particular story was back during George Floyd.
Oh,
This is 2021, so we actually had the guard deployed in Minneapolis during that time as well. And we actually, at one point, I hang out at a bookstore. That's a progressive lefty bookstore. You actually go into it, you'll see a poster from Vietnam of Ho Chi Minh up there and some other stuff. But anyway, we're all sitting around talking one day, and in comes three National Guard members in full gear, assault rifles, everything, and they were fascinated by the bookstore and told us straight up, yeah, we're actually socialists. And we had a conversation with them for a while. They bought books and then they went on their way. No, current round, we haven't really had anything like that. Tyler actually brings up a good point on violations of the Constitution amendments, especially with the Fourth and the Second Amendments for right to bear arms. But definitely the First Amendment has been a consistent thing that has been violated these days. ICE now says can't assemble, you can't videotape us. And in fact, they recently arrested four journalists who were just reporting on the protest that had happened in, I believe it was City Church in St. Paul, where one of the pastors is apparently the regional director of the St. Paul ICE office. So I think recently a lot of those journalists were released recently. But I don't know if any charges or whatnot has been dropped against them. Does anyone have any update on that?
It's hard. As far as I know, charges haven't been dropped, but think about it. Raids in the middle of the night
Yeah.
to take these people in. Ultimately, am I shocked they're assaulting the First Amendment? No. Am I shocked on their attacks of the Fourth Amendment against search and seizures? No. Am I shocked by their attacks on the 14th Amendment, trying to take away citizenship from people? No. But the one that shocks the hell out of me is their attack on the Second Amendment.
And I know
That
there's been a lot
that's
of
supposedly the core of their beliefs.
Well, when they
the
get to shoot,
NRA has been rather silent on that, and I know there's at least online I've heard grumblings of people, and even my one of my relatives back home in Louisiana, who's a very far right person, was to me recently really complaining about, well, how could this happen?
what did the NRA say about it?
Oh, mm,
Oh, we were still waiting for a response.
They say people need guns to fight against a tyrannical government. Well, you got a
tyrannical
tyrannical
government here.
government now.
Oh, maybe I should renew my NRA membership. No, joking. Definitely don't have one of those.
No, I find it um very funny how a lot of these people and ICE agents, there almost seems to be this belief that, oh, I could be the military operator, I could be the SEAL Team 6 person, I could be the one going after and kicking in the door and getting the violent criminal. And it's just all these cowards who cover their face, wear excessive armor, and incitement of cruelty just seems to be the one thing that they really want to do.
Salmi, I saw you opened up. Join us, men talking about guns and whatnot.
Well, I was gonna say, if there's one thing this exposes is, those people who see themselves as conservative, who are now opening their eyes and seeing how bad it really is, and that they feel betrayed for voting for this administration. And then there are those who are blindly defending what's going on despite everything. And another thing I wanted to bring up, which is interesting, is there's a huge divide in the support for the administration. There are a lot more women who are now against the administration. I mean, this was always a trend, but there's now an even deeper divide between men and women on these political issues. And so it's really starting to split our society further.
I think the whole killing of Renee Good, there's definitely not just a misogynistic element to it. You know, he did an official that was not arrested, but killed Renee Good, said some profanities about her, and she was an LGBT plus person. So I think that had a definite effect on everything. Probably for the worse, but this is who they are. These are the creeps that are in ICE. You know, I think
Yeah.
that's why Trump had to pardon all the Jan Sixers because he needed another Legion for ICE, but I don't think that was a mistake that she was an LGBT
Well, and
woman.
also just her last words to her was, "I'm not mad at you." And then she was
Right.
trying to move out the way, and then after he shot her, you hear her just like bitch to her. And
Yeah.
then less than 48 hours, you see a whole bunch of masked federal agents showing up in vehicles, basically cleaning out Jonathan Ross, that's the guy who shot her, his entire house of stuff, and then some masked person taking the vehicle out of their garage with other stuff, and then a federal escort.
And he doesn't get actually investigated. It's Renee Good who gets investigated. And her, was
Her
it her
wife
fiance or wife
and yeah,
and her family? And
and her family, yeah. And it's been brought up before how there's a lot of assault, sexual assault that these ICE gangs are committing. And I see a lot of about the killings, the detaining, but I haven't seen a whole lot about the sexual assault crimes that they've been committing.
The
right.
most
Yeah.
recent one around here was there was the video of the ICE agent who had someone detained and basically dragged her out of the vehicle and went to one of those porta potties and then went in with her. So
That was filmed, I believe.
that
They had
was
that filmed as
that
well.
was one of the filmed ones. Who knows what's going on that's not being filmed?
I I've been seeing I think there's some always should outline whenever there is a break within the ranks of the Republicans against Trump. And lately I've been seeing a lot of calls for Kristi Noem to be removed from office or to resign. And we saw, after the backlash, Greg Bovino, the what is he?
SS leader or something.
Yeah, well,
A very short man.
yeah, he was demoted. Now I'm just curious, you know, are these people being removed or attempts to have them removed? Is that going to actually change anything? Or
Absolutely not.
Mm.
Absolutely not, because Kristi Noem's still in her position. Greg Bovino's just moving back to wherever in DC, and gosh knows whatever else he's going to be doing now. If there were any justice in society, they'd all be standing trial. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, speaking of breaks in the Republicans, there was one Republican senator, I believe it was, or congressman. I'm trying to find it. I can't remember what his name was. I saw a video. Somebody stopped him in like the hallway of Congress. They said Trump called, I forget what, something,
Oh.
he was Trump called him something like unqualified, incompetent, and something else. And then the guy's response was, they asked what his thoughts was. He goes, "Oh, that's actually a good thing because that means I'm qualified to be the Secretary of Homeland Security." And I forgot what other position he mentioned, hinting at certain Christy Nolan. I forget who else.
yeah, that was I
Stephen Miller.
Yeah, Stephen Miller. Yes, yes.
I think Kristi Noem said some had some shots for Stephen Miller. Oh no, that's right. She gave the I was just following orders. Nothing like the Nazis during Nuremberg.
But
But
speaking of Stephen Miller, who would have thought we'd have a Jew a Jew
yep.
being, the architect of essentially Nazism in the U.S.
I mean, he's an extreme Zionist, so there's no surprise there.
Well, I mean, and Jerry, you represent the United Jewish People's Fraternal Order. I'm sure we've heard material from them talking about the capos that existed in the ghettos, the Jewish ghetto police, and the
The
council,
Judenrat.
the Judenrat that were tasked with carrying out the policies of the Nazis just with a Jewish face.
Yep.
It almost seems to me, that Stephen Miller fits the bill.
That's why we want someone here. I know maybe next time from our sister organization, the Cervantes Fraternal Society, to speak because you do see people from a Latino background in their ICE garb as well. I mean,
Yeah, Yes, there is a lot of Latinos in in ICE. I've seen Puerto Ricans, I've seen all different backgrounds, and I'm sure a lot of them are Gusano Cubans. It would not shock me.
But as a, contemporary example, I'm told Ukraine can't be neo-Nazi or fascist because Zelensky, he's an actor.
He
Mhm.
definitely
He's
acts.
Jewish.
No,
Right.
that's an act too, I think. I believe he has a Christian cross that he carries around. So he's definitely acting as to be a Jew.
Yeah. But it's amazing. That hurts a lot of the credibility in the fight against Trump fascism because so many of these people have actively worked to support fascist movements abroad.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we want to expound on that a little bit more because that I think that's important to point that out.
It's just another example of how historically the so-called center can never be successful in fighting fascism. It always has to come from the left and progressive forces.
Maybe
Yeah.
a labor led progressive force,
So, like I had
nodding
mentioned
heads.
earlier, there are some encouraging signs out of Minneapolis. The organizing and the fronts that are going on here are not quite that united labor-led organizations, but it's definitely, I think, the first formations of a Democratic coalition. I will, in fact, be going to a memorial for Alex Preddy tomorrow, as he was a member of one of the sister organizations within my union. So I'll be definitely talking to people and passing out literature.
And
Um,
so how have the unions responded to this?
so before Alex Preddy, there was, I am blanking on his name, but there was the union member who was abducted and deport and
Omar Abrego
disappeared to El
Garcia.
Salvador. Yes. And before that happened, his union had been a bit moribund or not saying anything about everything going on. But once that happened for him, people started raising voices and asking questions more. And it's been the same with public sector workers here. Because full disclosure, I do work in the public sector. We're told, well, you work for the federal government, you got to support the mission. But a lot of us are like, no, this was our, well, it's an AFL-CIO union, so it uses our brother, our sister. I like to say our fellow workers. Anyway, it was them. It could be you. And in fact, they wanted to send some of us to go work at the federal building in Minneapolis, where ICE is headquartered out of. And I raised concerns that of no, because we've also got people who work with us that match the ethnic profile of people getting disappeared from their houses and cars. And you want to send us out towards that where there's a bunch of people in mass with guns? No,
Yeah. I
absolutely
mean,
not.
that
I
would
wrote
be insane if they were doing that. That'd be, they would just be wanting to start trouble right there. Because I'm sure it would go the other way, non-violently. Because all in all, like and this is good in my opinion. It's been a very non-violent protest, which I think is good because I think they're waiting. I think the ICE goons and everyone in the Trump admin is waiting for something, an excuse for them to put more military force or more violence
Trump
into
is
it.
just itching to enforce the Insurrection Act.
Right. And so I could see them enforcing something like that. Yeah, let's bring all these people into the same building and cause a commotion. But I honestly think that would backfire on them because it really has been a positive struggle, I would say, on the force of democracy and people.
Well, and if I can go on a tangent real quick, one of the talking points out of the administration has been the protesters here are disrupting places of worship. One of the, it's like I had been mentioned earlier, there was the protest inside one of the churches. I talked with a couple locals around here, and they said that while they are supportive of the protesters and speaking up, they thought it was a line too far that they entered an actual place of worship during a service to do that. And it's like, well, why couldn't you do it outside? And so
Because
that's kind of a debate a bit of a debate back and forth I had
I
with that.
wouldn't be surprised if the forces that led that protest came from ultra left movements.
And that's also what I've had to tell some anarchists I know around here, like, hey, the state's got a monopoly on violence. You don't want to, you don't want to try to open that because they've got the monopoly on violence.
And you just saw what they did to someone who was protesting peacefully. He had a license to own a gun and to carry
And
it.
let's be clear, he wasn't even at a protest. That just happened randomly in the street. There was no organized protest there at that time.
Seeing all of this, where I live, it feels like people see what's happening, they stand in solidarity, but they're still very much insulated as to what's happening. And as Jerry mentioned, they're just waiting. The government is just waiting for people to stop protesting peacefully. But I think what we really need to be seeing here is the rest of the nation is seeing what's happening in Minneapolis. And we need to take this time to organize behind the scenes and prepare because it's not going to remain there forever. We can't just keep living like ignorance is bliss.
Yep.
ICE is still recruiting. It's only going to get worse.
Still
And they have
recruiting.
such a huge budget, right? They don't even know what to do with their budget. They have so much money.
And we can't forget there was an amendment that was proposed to a bill that would prevent ICE from detaining and deporting U.S. citizens, and it was struck down in the House of Representatives. So it's not about immigration, it's about control, it's about power. Like we've said so many times, it's a fascist movement.
We've been at this discussion for a while. I don't know if we're gonna wrap up soon, but I just wanted to briefly tie this into bigger picture. I know that we didn't want to get too much into the international stuff this time, but everything that going back in history, all the attacks on democracy that Hitler or Mussolini perpetrated, it was all for the eventual goal that they would have zero resistance in their drive for war. And we've been seeing it lately, the Trump administration frantically trying to bring back old style American imperialism. Now, we know that liberal or corporate media has been making the impression that that American imperialism is coming back. No, it never disappeared. It just is coming back in a more open form. But, we're seeing,
They ripped away the liberal and humanitarian facade.
I
exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was obvious when, it was almost like, well, at least they're being honest when they changed the Department of Defense to now the Department of War. Like, well,
Right,
at least they're being honest there.
Which
And
was its
right,
original name.
as a wise person's told me a lot, it's the chickens coming home to roost.
right. Well, we are seeing, Trump illegally kidnapping foreign leaders such as President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela. We're seeing the drama unfolding with between the US and NATO as far as Greenland goes. Trump has called many times for the annexation of Canada as the 51st state, which is very reminiscent of when Nazi Germany annexed the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. But what's going on now, we see in Alberta this right-wing separatist movement being supported by Trump, which to me reminds me even more of the collaborators of Nazi Germany and France, the ones that instituted
Vichy?
the Vichy France. It was a bunch of Nazis that overthrew their republic and basically gave their sovereignty to Nazi Germany. If Alberta separatists are successful, I can't see any other parallel to describe this than Vichy France.
This talk of U.S. imperialism falling back to its harshest forms, and hearing the discourse of everything that's going on, this discussion we've had today, I can't help but think of that Amy Césaire quote, fascism is imperialism turned inward.
It's true. They're using the methods that they use to repress people abroad. They're just bringing it home.
All right. So we are nearly out of time for today. Any final words? Anyone?
And I think we've summed it up well.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to View from Left Field. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night.